Fairly recently, I was invited onto a podcast with Blazing Bob, Rugs and Classic Go, and we was talking about all of the changes that have been proposed from Blizzard regarding reducing the item level from TOC and ICC. I'm sort of glad I didn't publish this video, even though I've got it, and I will publish it. If you want it published, let me know in the comments, because it's the full sort of hour and a half discussion, something like that, which if you want to hear, you can listen to it, but obviously it's not really that relevant now because they've come out and said about something else that they might consider instead. And this is now to actually increase the item level from Ulduar rather than reducing the item level overall from TOC and ICC. And this is actually not only probably a positive change that I would be behind. If you heard my video when I first spoke about the TOC and ICC item level reduction, I wasn't on board with it. But it was because of the knock-on effect that it has down the line, rather than anything else, really. And that sort of comes through in the discussion that we had on that podcast. Whereas increasing the item level from Ulduar is just going to close the gap a lot more than it did, you know, as in jumping from Ulduar Gear to 245 from normal TOC is quite a big jump. This closes that and actually makes hard mode Ulduar Gear better than normal TOC, which is good, and we're going to break this post down, obviously, and get into it. But not only that, it now doesn't have a knock-on effect into ICC. So the knock-on effect that we spoke about during the podcast was the fact that ICC is one of those raids that you get a stacking damage buff over time. So it will start as a 0% damage buff, of course, and it's damage and healing and absorbs, by the way, so it's everything across the board. And then, you know, after a week or two, you'll get 5%, then 10%, then 15%, and it goes all the way up to 30%. So if people are going to need that 30% buff to be able to actually clear the raid, reducing player power along the way is very counterproductive, because we know that a lot of guilds are not going to be able to clear ICC Heroic in the first weeks without a buff. You know, it's as simple as that. There won't be that many guilds that do Lich King Heroic with a 0% buff. So going in with a 0% buff and having lower item level from TOC, so your actual player power isn't as high as it should be either, it will have a big knock-on effect and even affect progression, because they was going to reduce the item level in ICC as well. So even progressing on bosses, like if you were stuck on Professor Putricide, which was actually an example that Ruggs gave during the podcast, where he said something along the lines of they wiped on 1% when it was a 0% buff and just couldn't quite get it down. As soon as they got the 5% buff, it died. You know, that 5% damage buff, or 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, all the way up, is going to be the difference between you being able to kill some bosses in your current gear and not be able to kill them at all. So by leaving the player power alone by the time you hit ICC, it's a really good thing, in my opinion. But let's have a look at the blue post and break down their reasoning why. By theirs, I mean Blizzard. So they've said in the discussion around the idea of possibly lowering item level in the back half of the content in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, there was a lot of feedback from the community. Blizzard has released a developer blue post in response to feedback and is suggesting another idea of possibly increasing the item level of gear from hard mode Ulduar and including pre-nerf Ulduar content. Now, it's fairly obvious we should get pre-nerf content anyway. They said that there'd never been pre-nerf. It was always the same. Obviously, we knew that wasn't the case. You've only got to look through Wowpedia patch notes to see that there was lots of changes to Ulduar content over the months. So they said, hi everyone, wanted to chime back in here now that we've had a few days to digest feedback around this and think on it some more. While we do still feel that adjusting the eye level curve in the last half of the expansion would be a net positive to the experience overall, we cannot argue that the idea that taken at face value, a nerf is a nerf, and that still stings. As a result, we've studied the commentary from the players carefully and come up with an alternative to the original suggestion based on the feedback. Instead of nerfing item levels in TOC, we'd like to see how everyone feels about buffing item levels in Ulduar Normal, and this would be by 6 item levels, and Ulduar Hard Mode significantly by 12 item levels. Past that, we'd make no other changes. So this is good because it's now only going to affect how easy you do TOC. So again, there's got to be a little bit of give and take. Now, the give would be, well, it leaves ICC alone, basically, because, yes, there's going to be some Ulduar hard mode pieces where they're going to be 251 now versus 258 of Heroic TOC. So there will be some where losing the 7 item level is going to be worth it, you know, on things like trinkets or, you know, just particular items where actually now they're going to be even better than they was back in the day. You might not replace them in TOC, which for the odd item, that's absolutely fine because it's still overall going to leave ICC alone and it would remain the same difficulty as if you went into tier 10, which is ICC, as full tier 9 BIS. You know, that's important. Not that many people are bothered about the experience they have in Trial of the Crusader, but they're very, very bothered about the experience they're going to have in Ulduar and in ICC. So the fact that you're going to also now get better gear while you're doing Ulduar, doing the hard modes, that's going to have a knock-on effect because it is then going to start to make Ulduar hard modes even easier. So like I say, there's got to be a negative. And I would say the negative is the fact that, firstly, it's going to make Ulduar hard modes that bit easier because as you're doing the easier hard modes, you're now getting better gear than what you would have had and what the content was tuned for, unless they make changes to health and stuff like that, which I highly doubt. But you're going to be able to get Ulduar hard modes down a bit quicker as long as you're already doing some of the easier ones anyway, if that makes sense. And what is already a very, very easy raid, being Trial of the Crusader, you know, it's renowned for being easy. You're not going to struggle in there. No guilds are going to struggle in TOC. So you're going to be able to do it now even easier than it was before when it was already very easy. So there is going to be that knock-on effect where it's almost going to make Tier 9, I'm not going to say completely irrelevant, but it's going to make it easy, but to the point where maybe it does need looking at. It needs buffing a little bit. But ultimately, by the time we get into ICC, everything should be balanced out and back to normal. And, you know, the difficulty of ICC for the gear that we've got should be relevant, if that makes sense. So they've said this will put Ulduar 25 normal gear at 232, placing it 6 levels above Kel'Thuzad, Sarfarian and Malagos 25 gear, and making even normal feel much more rewarding in comparison to Tier 7 raid end bosses. This would also put hard mode gear at 251, which is definitely a very significant step up in power. This means that Ulduar 25-man hard mode gear will be slightly higher in item level than TOC 25 normal gear, which would be 245. This might be an alarming jump at first, but there are a few factors that led us to believe that this would be a net positive. The only thing I'd be interested in seeing what does get changed, because this is all specifically talking about 25-man, so 25-man item level, you know, being 251 in hard modes. But in 10-man, you've got like 232 item level hard mode trinkets, such as Mjolnir, which I'll, Stu, hopefully you'll put it on the screen. Stu's the editor, by the way, just in case you wondered. I'm not talking to someone next to me. But anyway, so Mjolnir Runestone, for example, that's only from 10-man. So is the hard mode 10-man gear also going to get buffed? Because if that got buffed by 12 item level up to 251, that's going to be BIS for so many people because it already remains very, very strong and BIS for people who are trying to get soft armor pen capped. But if that was to raise in item level as well, that would be a pretty crazy item to be able to get from 10-man. So I don't know if it is just 25-man specifically that they're looking at changing and leaving 10-man item level alone completely. But if we got a buff to the 10-man item level as well, particularly the hard modes, that could make for some interesting BIS list changes. But the reason they're saying it will be a net positive is we are doing pre-nerf Ulduar. So during early interviews, we suggested we would likely not be doing a pre-nerf system to most raids in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, as the changes were not very extensive for most raid dungeons. This remains true, however, after we actually started digging into the data around raid changes that occurred during original Wrath, we realised that Ulduar actually had received fairly massive nerfs, both while it was current content and immediately afterwards. We knew that already. As a result, we will be implementing pre-nerf modes to Ulduar, including the hard mode bosses. These changes in some cases may make bosses and hard modes significantly more difficult than their final state, and we feel justifies the power gain in hard mode rewards. Just like in 2009, we are somewhat concerned that if we implement pre-nerf Ulduar and ship rewards as is, it may not feel sufficiently rewarding. Yeah, I mean, I get that. And like I said, I mean, they've almost alluded to exactly what I said a minute ago. And I hadn't actually read all of this beforehand, by the way. The fact that you're going to be getting higher item level will make it easier. You know, your hard mode progression will be easier. But if it's going to make it significantly more difficult, then understandable. But on the basis that, you know, they're probably not going to be any more difficult than certain servers that we're not meant to play on. In fact, they won't be any more difficult than those, and they can be done in the appropriate item level. I don't know. I mean, I see this as a good thing, by the way. I just want to put that out there now. I am fully behind increasing the item level from Ulduar. Absolutely. I cannot get behind reducing the item level from TOC and ICC, as I say, because of that long-term effect. This is not going to have a long-term effect. This is only going to affect hard mode progression and TOC. Outside of that, it's not going to do a great deal. So finally, availability and volume of Ulduar hard mode gear. So in contrast to heroic raids later in the expansion with fully fleshed out higher item level loot tables, the loot tables for hard mode boss kills are the same as normal, but each boss other than Algalon grants one additional bonus piece of gear at the higher item level. Across the entire raid, this means that there are a maximum total of around a dozen pieces of additional gear available at this higher item level per clear. While we would be making these items significantly more powerful, They will remain difficult to obtain, and this is not a huge amount of extra items at this level of power, at least not compared to a full tier's worth of heroic difficulty items. Yep, totally agree. There's not that many to worry about, and even some of the hard mode items are just like not going to be used. There are key ones that people are going to want, and this is going to make some things absolutely mental. Trust me, them being 251, especially things like weapons, it's going to make weapons really, really sought after, because it's going to literally last you until you kill Anna Barak 25 heroic, where that then starts to drop 258 weapons. But still, it's going to be crazy. I hope this goes through, this change, because it will be crazy getting the hard mode gear in 25-man now. As for how this impacts PvP, we still need to evaluate Season 6 gear for similar adjustments there, so that the arena players didn't feel that they need to raid hard modes to be able to compete. We don't believe we'd totally re-itemize Season 6 gear, but a few upward adjustments would likely occur to offset this. All told, our goal really is to make Wrath, and particularly Ulduar, the best possible overall experience it can be. We love Ulduar in particular, and we think many of you do as well, and we want to see it shine. Rewards are one of the knobs. Rewards are one of the knobs. Rewards are one of the knobs we... Oh, I can't. The word knob just made me laugh, sorry. So it's one of those knobs we can turn that can really impact the experience without having to... I've got 2 kids, by the way. I shouldn't find that funny. Need to grow up. Without having to make any kind of mechanical changes. After some thought, we think these changes are a good way to make this phase of the game feel better and maintain relevance for a bit of time after Trial of the Crusader releases, but without making later phases feel worse. As previously mentioned, this is still totally just an idea, and we'd love to continue to get your feedback on it. Thank you. I would say this is the best idea out of the 2. So if you're going to make any changes, this is the one to do. Nerfing token ICC item levels, for me, an absolute no-no. Just don't do it. Buffing the item level of Ulduar, I see it, I get it, and I think it would actually be quite good. Do I still think it's necessary? No. So my personal, my feelings on it is it doesn't need to be done. It's an unnecessary change. But I do see why they want to do it. So, this for me is a good change if they want to make it. I just still personally don't believe it needs to change. There's nothing wrong with a big jump in eye level from Ulduar into Tok, in my opinion. But overall, that's my thoughts on it. That's the news that I should have posted about 5 days ago, but I've been immersed too far into Azeroth on these fresh pre-patch servers. So, sorry about that. I'm a little bit slow. But be sure to like and subscribe. Consider joining the channel as a member as well. Get your name shouted out next to me somewhere, wherever it's put. And roll the outro. There's lots of ways you can support the channel to keep me here putting out World of Warcraft content and covering all future MMOs. Consider joining the channel as a member. You get access to emotes. Everyone will know you're a member when you comment on future videos because you get a nice icon next to your name. And you get access to members-only videos, which I'll be putting a lot of on the channel throughout the year. Additionally, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.